Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 29th episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and my guest co-host this week is another girlie with Eastern North Carolina ties. She is a reporter and wine lover, too, and my guest co-host this week is Melissa Henry. Hello, Melissa. How are you?
Hi, Liam. I am doing well. I'm so happy that I got to do this with you. I haven't talked to you in a while, but
I know.
yeah, it's crazy. But we're both in the news world, and so I love true crime stuff personally. Like, I'm really invested in these kinds of things. Like, I don't know, I go down a rabbit hole of reading about this stuff. So I was so happy when you asked me.
Yeah, well, and I know that you're like a true crime girly too. Like, I know you're all about that. So Melissa and I first met when I was taking her job actually in Jacksonville, North Carolina. She trained me right before she moved to Colorado, where she is right now. She's a reporter at KKTV, the CBS affiliate in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Yep, I've been here I actually just passed my 3-year anniversary, but we have actually a lot of crime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado, I don't know what it is. It's got just some crazy stories about people that go missing, people whose bodies have never been found. I've covered a couple of those, personally. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, you know what it is? I feel like it's like mountain stuff, because I feel like
real.
same thing in Chattanooga, like the weirdest shit happens here, and I feel like the same, the weirdest shit happens in Colorado too. So I also know because we follow each other on Twitter, that I saw that you also covered the Letitia Stout trial too, and everyone in the true crime world I know was absolutely obsessed with that case, and so that was absolutely a ride, huh?
It was incredibly fascinating to sit in the courtroom for all 6 weeks of trial, first of all.
Oh, man.
I mean,
I didn't even know it lasted 6 weeks. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've sat in on trials before, but never one as long as 6 weeks. So It was just insane, the amount of just witnesses they had and just all the evidence. It was crazy.
Yeah, well, and I also speaking of weird shit happening in weird towns too. So we I know that weird shit happens in Jacksonville, North Carolina too. I've covered 2 cases in Jacksonville over the last couple of weeks, and so one of those cases I know that you know very, very well. It was the Mariah Woods case. That's episode 6 of this podcast. And then a couple weeks ago we did Jenna Franks too, which I know was a little bit after your time. But I know that that just it's quite a ride of a town for sure.
I remember you telling me about the Jenna Franks stuff when it was first happening, and I remember telling you to push harder on that, because I was like, that's insane.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, and it still is to this day. So, but anyways, we can probably talk about Jacksonville all day. I know we're both way beyond that. So let's get to the wine, because that's my favorite part of the podcast, everyone's favorite part of the podcast. So this week we are drinking Z. Alexander Brown's Pinot Noir. It's created by the lead singer of the country rock band, the Zac Brown Band. The vineyard says the wine is overflowing with intense aromas of black cherry, vanilla, and toasty oak, and robust flavors of fresh raspberry jam and strawberry. So, man, those fruit flavors, huh? They love those.
So I'm super excited. I just poured it, and I've been smelling it a little bit sitting here next to it.
Okay.
But I haven't taken a first taste yet.
Okay, well, you're way ahead of me, because I'm literally just cutting the foil right now.
Oh, okay, so. All right. Well, I'll wait then.
Well, let's get there. Listen, I love an ambitious wine girly, so no judgment here at all. All right, let's pop this open. There you go. So the red fruit flavors I feel are always so interesting, because I feel like wines always either really lean into that or lean way far away from that too. So they are clearly leaning right into that. So
I'm a big oak person when it comes to wines. I love that I saw that this had oak and vanilla. Vanilla as well is a big priority of mine when picking out wine.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well now we know. So wait, so what are you? Wait, hold on. I'm gonna guess. I feel like you go for a nice Pinot Noir.
I like Pinot Noir. I'm not gonna lie. It's one of my go-tos, but my direct go-to above Pinot Noir would probably be usually either blends or Cabernet Sauvignon.
Okay.
So usually,
I see that for you.
Yeah, cab. I'm a big cab girl.
Yeah, me too. So that's why we're friends. But also, okay. Well, cheers to you, Melissa. Thank you so much for coming on this week. Oh,
Oh,
toasty
that's
oak.
good.
Yeah, toasty oak is like the first thing I got for sure. Robust flavors of fresh raspberry jam and strawberry. Yeah, that's a really great way to describe that.
You know what I like about it? And this is always kind of something that I look for when I'm, picking out or like prioritizing my favorite wines is it's not too overwhelming that after one glass, I'm going to want to be done with it. Like, I'm going to want to drink the whole bottle,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a time and place for sure for like a really like aggressive, like, it hits you right in the back of the throat kind of a wine. But then once you have one glass of it, you're kind of like, well, that was a lot. Like you're overwhelmed and it overpowers everything.
I'm getting this very much so in the front of the mouth for sure. So not really too strong in the back of the mouth at all, actually.
Yeah, no, it's very nice. It yeah, it's great to just like have to sip on. Like I say, it's not too aggressive, if that makes any sense.
Very tanniny though, for sure. I'm getting a whole lot of tannins. And so let's talk about, okay, so black cherry vanilla. I don't really think I get a whole lot of black cherry or vanilla, actually.
I'm trying to taste it. Maybe it'll come. You know how like wines change over time as they open up. Maybe that'll come out later because I'm not getting it either initially.
Yeah, well, we will revisit the wine at the in like the middle of this podcast, so hold that thought for sure. Because I'm sure we have a whole lot to talk about. So I love talking about wine. So
yeah, the oak is definitely there, front and center. Oh, you're right,
front and center. But let's move on right to the story because I know you know about this one, and we have like so much to discuss. We could talk about wine all day, but this case is just crazy. So let's dive right into this one. So Melissa, I know that we've all been here before where you go out for the night, but just don't remember how you got home or even leaving the bar. Like, I think, like, personally, a telltale sign of a really good night. But in the story I'm going to tell you this week, not only does no one remember our victim leaving the bar, but there's no evidence that he ever did. Melissa, this week I want to tell you the story of Brian Shaffer and the long night out. This week's story begins where our long night out actually ends. It's April 1st, 2006 in Columbus, Ohio. It's the very first day of spring break for students at The Ohio State University. And Brian Shaffer's two friends, Clint and Meredith, who he went out with the night before, are cracking their eyes open for the very first time, probably desperately trying to cure an intense hangover. But as the day gets clearer, the night before starts to come into focus too. And they remember that when last call came and went at their favorite local hangout spot, they couldn't find Brian to bring home with them. They remember the music from a local band dying, the lights flicking on, and the bar clearing out, but Brian was nowhere to be found. They assumed that Brian had shuffled out early and went home to head to bed for the night, but now they're calling his cell and still can't seem to get a hold of him. About 2 hours north of them in Toledo, Ohio, Brian's girlfriend Alex is trying to get a hold of him too, but she's not having any luck either. For most of the day, Alex assumes that Brian is just sleeping off his hangover and that he'll call her back when he can, no big deal. But as Saturday turns into Sunday, there is still no sign of Brian. And so that night, Alex goes to his apartment in Columbus and finds nothing, a totally normal apartment with no sign of Brian at all. But it's not until the next day that things start to feel just simply too real. When Brian misses his flight for his trip to Miami with Alex, and that is something that Brian just simply would not miss. Not only has Brian always longed for a life in the tropics, but he's also madly in love with Alex and possibly was even planning on proposing to her on that trip. And so this just does not feel right to any of Brian's friends or family, and they report him missing that day.
When I first hear about that, I think of how scared Alex must have been in that moment. I mean, it's it's always scary too to think about when you go out with your group of friends at a bar, and we've all done it, where it's like you could be in a dangerous spot, but you're just counting on the odds that, well, nothing will probably happen, right?
Well, yeah, and like naturally too, like everyone's like altering their state of mind, you know? It's like a very like weird place to put yourself in, but it's like also like if you're out with like a whole bunch of people, it should like also oddly feel very like safe, right? Because you're with a whole bunch of people who are in the exact same place that you are.
Well, and too, you know, like I was thinking back on it actually yesterday, when I was reading about this just story in general. There were a lot of nights out when I was in college that, looking back on them now, I'm like, oh God, that was probably not as safe as I should have been, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We've all been there. We've all been like,
At the time, my parents, you know, they were like, you probably shouldn't be doing that. And every college kid is like, oh, I'm fine. We're good. We all trust each other. And now, like,
yeah, nothing bad's going to happen.
Just a few years later into my 20s, I'm like, oh, I see their point.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. And so, yeah, and I think too, like going to like Alex's perspective too, you know, it's like, okay, you know, like, you know, dumb guy, right? Like, you know, he's probably been there 100 times where it's like, he's not answering his phone, you know, and this is also too 2006, right? So it's not it's not like, you know, like today we have Find My iPhone, like we have all these apps that like you can make sure that everyone's okay and safe, and like Snapchat, like you have all this trail of digital evidence. Like this was like that was not happening at all. Like this was like very much so the land of flip phones and, you know, and landlines, and like, you know, it's, you know, not exactly as easily accessible to find out where everyone is. So point being is like not hearing from someone from a couple of hours or even maybe even a day, probably a lot more normal than it would be today.
Well, and not to mention when you know your friend's been out drinking, we've all been that person where you wake up the next day and you're like, oh my God, I have 7 missed calls. And it's because
it's like, where'd you go? It's like, I thought you guys knew where I was. Yeah.
Well, and it's like you were dead to the world because you were dancing and you were drinking, you know?
Right.
Oh my God. So, but I think we need to know, like, what actually happened on Brian's night out.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely, Melissa. So before we even get there, though, there are like a few things you need to understand about Brian. First off, he's like a really big guy, 6'2", fit and pretty good looking too. Certainly one to stand out in a night crowd. He was 27 years old at the time and was a second-year med student at the Ohio State University, where he also had went for undergrad. So like very like familiar with the area. Sure. He really had everything going for him too. Like I said, he was in love with Alex, who was also a second-year medical student. They both had, you know, made great grades, and he was truly the life of the party, like the guy on campus. But, you know, sometimes life has this weird way of hitting you when you least expect it, and the tragic series of events that involves Brian Shaffer's disappearance truly begins just 3 weeks before his big spring break night out on the town. Brian Shaffer's mom died from cancer, and this was a tragic blow to Brian. She was sick for a really long time, but nothing can ever prepare you for that kind of loss, especially since they were like really, really close.
And that can totally throw someone off, like, you know, the normal person that you expect them to be. And then something like that happens, their character can totally, you can kind of throw that out the window at that point.
Yeah. Right. There's no normal behavior in that kind of state of mind. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, and I don't mind mentioning this. My mom passed away when I was 18, and I'm totally comfortable talking about it. But, you know, it does change your social life. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that about you, and I'm really sorry to hear that.
No, it's okay. Yeah. I was just trying to like relate to the story a little bit. Like, you know, when something like that happens abruptly, especially like in college, it can totally change your social atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure too, like, you know, you're used to this like certain lifestyle, and like too, like, I feel like, and you can definitely relate to this, to a certain extent too. I'm sure of it. You know, it's like your parents, like, you know, having your parents be sick, I'm sure, or, you know, pass, it's like such a weird, like, you know, like you, like, I feel like you grow like monumentally, you know, in like, you know, in a very short period of time, and like that kind of
absolutely,
yeah, and like you're used to having them around, like you're used to having them caring for you, and then all of a sudden like they're gone, and it's just like it's like, I'm sure it's like a very weird thing to cope with. So
well, and what's weird about it too is like we see movies and we get this like storyline in us of how we think people process that kind of loss and grieve, but there's really no way to be prepared to be like someone on the sidelines, like to be a friend to somebody who's, whose parent died, because you might have all these expectations of what your friend might be like in that experience, but everyone handles it different. Yeah. Like, there's no way to know. There's no way to prepare yourself. It is. You have to roll with the punches, kind of.
Well, and I'm sure there are, like, a very, very, very small percentage of people that ever even have to, like, know what that's like to lose a parent at that, at that young age, too.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you even say?
Right. And even, what's weird is, even for me, like, I've had friends in the past few years who have lost a parent at still a relatively young age. And I find that I don't even know what to say to them, even though I myself have been through it. I don't know what their experience is. I don't know how it's affecting them. So, how you kind of feel awkward when you're talking to someone who's just had someone die in their life, because you're like, I don't know what to say. I still feel that awkwardness, even though I thought I wouldn't, because it's like, well, I've been through it. But no, it's everyone's different.
Yeah, and everyone's relationship with their parents is different too. Even if no matter how close you are, it's still like you have just everyone has a very different relationship with their mom and dad. And so yeah, it is like, I can imagine how that's just like a very like weird frame of mind to even put yourself in.
So do we know at all like how Brian might have been handling it and what his relationship was like with his mom?
Yeah, well, they were very, very, very close. And so from the outside looking in, he was handling it pretty well. But those who really knew Brian said they could tell he was having a really hard time with it. Nothing too extreme, but he was definitely holding in a lot of the emotions that you would typically expect someone to feel when they are hit with that kind of loss. Maybe because, again, Brian was this bigger guy, really popular, well off, and for guys like that, it can be probably, a bit harder to express how they're feeling about those kinds of things. On March 31st, Brian and his friends wrapped up their final day of classes for the first half of the semester and were planning their night out. Brian wanted to go, but first he had to meet up with his dad, who was taking him out for a congratulatory steak dinner for finishing the first half of the semester so strongly. At this dinner, Brian's dad said, he just looked really, really tired, and maybe it was the late night studying, but he had a sinking feeling that it had something to do with his mother's passing. Brian's father said he thought to himself that Brian probably shouldn't be going out partying that night, but he kept those thoughts inside because, Brian's a grown man. He can make his own decisions. So they talked for a while longer, expressed some sentiments and memories about Brian's mother, and then they went their separate ways. Brian then went to go meet with his friend Clint at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar that's just off of OSU's campus. This bar is your picture-perfect college hangout spot. It's actually not where it used to be anymore, and it has since moved to a spot just a few blocks over where it's now called the Ugly Tuna Saloona 2. The bar's original Yelp site says it was open until 2:30 in the morning every night of the week, but the vibes are still the same in this new location. The bar's website is filled with pictures of young college kids and late night crowds, and the bar's website says it is a unique, fun-forced atmosphere where friends are made every night of the week.
And it's so funny how we all like remember that one bar, like what it was for us. And I also, when I was like seeing this, I think that's such a funny name. Ugly Tuna Saloona.
Yeah, I feel like every college bar or every college campus too, like has that like one bar that it's like, why is it named that? Like no one ever really knows.
No
but
one
it's, like,
really
fun.
knows.
Yeah, right. It's like, and especially OSU is like a very college campus, right? It's like like typical college town. And so, so it's, like that, just screams to me, like where, it's like every Friday night is just jam packed, no matter what. So
yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like the type of place just based on like what I've read about the story that I probably would have hung out there if I went to OSU. I did not. Sure. But for us, where I went to school, it was called Pub 2, and they had Pub Wednesdays where you could get like $5 pitchers of beer, and everyone went, because college kids want to get drunk cheap. That's always the objective.
Right. And that's exactly what this place was for sure. It just reminds you. It's like, it definitely wasn't a dive bar, but it had like very dive feels, like that was just like, it was, because that's the kind of crowd you're catering to.
The type of bar where like the cocktails definitely are in like plastic cups. You're not getting glass cups.
Yeah, and they're like definitely like the ratio of like mixed to liquor like way too high. Like you know that it was like one drink and you're like on your butt. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
Well, so Brian and Clint are beginning their night at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, but they won't stay there for very much longer. They begin this celebratory bar hopping spree going from spot to spot all across downtown Columbus. About an hour after Brian got to the Ugly Tuna, he calls Alex to say, hey. Alex is in Toledo visiting family, like we said, to start off her spring break. He tells her that he loves her, that he can't wait to spend the week with her in Miami, and then he hangs up. At one point, too, he even calls his brother Derek. Derek and Brian have a pretty, average relationship. They're not super close, but they're not estranged by any means. But since their mom had passed, they became, a good bit closer. Brian tries to convince Derek to meet him out that night, and Derek says he did consider it, but decided to meet his friends out at a local bar instead. Clint says at each bar he and Brian went to that night, they had at least one shot each, but he says he can't remember how many drinks they had total. At one point, they meet up with their friend Meredith, who's sober, or at least more sober than Clint and Brian at this point, and she agrees to drive them back to the place where they started their night, the Ugly Tuna Saloona. And this is when their fun night out takes a turn for the very strange. Firstly, Melissa, I have to tell you more about this bar. The Ugly Tuna Saloona is not exactly your typical spot. It's in this shopping mall kind of sorts. That's really the best way I know how to describe it from pictures that I've seen. The campus's south end is in this really bad part of the city where there is a heavy concentration of crime. To combat that, the city built this inside like plaza again of sorts, again built like a mall, but it's filled with bars, restaurants, and shops. It's a way for businesses to be attracted to that part of town in a more secure way, though. Because of the area of town it's in, though, this plaza, and specifically the Ugly Tuna Saloona, is covered with security cameras from practically every single angle. And I point this all out because these security cameras are about to become very, very important for us. The only way for customers to get to the Ugly Tuna Saloona is up this escalator, which lets people off practically right at the entrance to the bar. Brian, Clint, and Meredith are seen on surveillance video coming up the escalator at 1:15 in the morning. The trio goes into the bar without any issues, probably get a few more drinks, enjoy the local band playing, and are having a good time by all standards. Apparently at one point, though, Clint says Brian starts talking to these two college-age women that Clint knew, but, based on what I read, it's not totally clear if Brian knows them too. Clint later tells Dateline that Brian starts to, quote, do his thing in reference to these two young women, but it's not totally 100% clear, like, what exactly he meant by that.
Well, I think he was flirting with them. I think we both know that. But, he was, trying to put the moves on him a little bit,
Yeah, that's certainly where my brain goes, but again, I'm just like, what about Alex,
Right.
So, I don't know, I didn't want to, so it could be, maybe he was just, schmoozing a little bit, maybe it was just, innocent, but, I don't know.
College kids too, he's not a kid though, he's 27, so he's not
he's like an adult.
Yeah, he's actually my age now, so I don't think of myself as being college age at all, but I guess for medical school you technically are, but no, this bar also, I was going to say, super weird setting. I totally get the trying to combat crime thing, but when I was seeing an escalator was involved and it's in a shopping mall, I was like, what kind of bar is in the second level of a mall?
Again, really, really weird, but it's kind of I don't know, I kind of picture it so there's actually something kind of similar in Chattanooga. It's this little again a little plaza of restaurants and shops and stuff, and there's not a bar in there, but there's still escalators that you can get to some of the restaurants, but it's all it's all outdoors because it's the South, Ohio's obviously a much different climate, so maybe that's kind of what they were we're going for. Like, that's kind of what I picture anyways. And like, we're about to show you like a whole bunch of videos and stuff of the security camera video that we're talking about, so you can get like a little bit of a better idea. But like, again, like everyone listening at home, like go look up this like video that we're going to link to, because you can kind of like see, like, I can think like while Melissa and I are like having a really hard time like describing it and like telling you what it even looks like, because it's just like a very weird environment. But it's also too like, I picture like again, like Midwest Ohio, like you're from Chicago,
yes,
so, like maybe you know this, so like, you know, like I feel like the like, because of, you know, it's cold like half of the year, so like maybe that's part of it too.
Well, so what you brought up about like what bar you said was similar where you are in Tennessee, like the concept of a food court, if I'm kind of phrasing that right, because here, I live in Colorado now, that's where I am, and now that I think of it, actually we do have like I don't know if food court is the right term, but it's like a food hall. That's what I'm going for. And it does have upper level bars, now that I think of it. And even though it does get cold here, because I'm in Colorado, it's enclosed enough that like people just wear a jacket in the winter and they're fine. So maybe it was a similar setting to that. I don't know. I haven't seen visuals yet. So.
I think it is, because I looked it up on Google Maps, and it's kind of like you go in, like you park on the street, and then you go in, and it's like, you know, this very walkable place, and then you can kind of get into these different spots. But like, again, you'll see on the video, like it's very much so enclosed. So it's very, very weird. But like, I think we'll get there in a second. So, but at 1:55 in the morning, Brian is seen for the very last time. He's seen on that same surveillance camera video outside the bar near the escalator talking to those two women. And then they appear as though they go back toward the bar entrance. Here, Melissa, I'm going to play this part of the video for you, and you can kind of just like describe it for us if that's okay.
Sure.
So this is like from the very, very beginning. So this is you're gonna see them coming up the escalator and all that jazz.
Okay, so I see a couple of security guards on the stairs next to the elevators. And then I see some people coming up the escalator, which looks to be...
So that's Brian right there.
So I see Brian. He's a tall dude with a t-shirt. Looks kind of cool. So I see Brian. They're zoomed in with his friends, presumably, Clint and Meredith.
Then we get to, and it kind of went fast. So this is a zoomed in portion of... So this is Brian right here. And these are the two like college age women that we're talking about. So what we were just zoomed in on before, they were like right here.
Okay, I kind of thought that was maybe where they were.
Okay, so this is where we were like when we first started.
Yes.
So these two security guards this is like clearly later in the night. These two security guards were there in the other video. That we were talking about. So again, this is happening like where Brian and those two women are talking, like it's like right down here.
Okay, gotcha.
So again, like security guards right there, like there were a few more people just kind of like, again, like chit-chatting like around like the little lobby area, but also too, so you'll see like a kind of like, I like the way you describe it, like a food hall, because like there are these like stairs, like these escalators, but like you can see like there's like, it's like totally like looks pretty enclosed. Like it may be like a little more open.
Yeah, no, it looks very enclosed, I would say.
Yeah.
It doesn't look super open.
Yeah, but and like I don't only mention that in the way of like it's like, you know, that feels a little bit more like secure, a little bit more private, I guess, right? If you like, instead of just like, you know, going down the escalator and just like being out into the world and like God knows what happens, like I feel like it's like a little bit more like, you know, there's only like a couple of doors probably that you can go in and out. And so point being, again, like, you know, like we're going to get to like what happens, but like if you are like leaving this place, like you're going to be seen, you know what I mean? And so, like there's like, you know, very few like entry and exit points to like, you know, to note here.
Yeah, there are only so many places you could be. It's kind of limited in terms of places a person could go.
Yeah, and it looks like there's like another like little like hallway over here that like overlooks where we're looking at right now, with like maybe a little bit more shops and stuff. But like, again, like it doesn't appear as though you can get out from any other place except for where we're looking at right now.
Yeah, definitely.
So really important.
Definitely.
Yeah. So just a few minutes after, you know, the clips that we were just looking at just now, the lights flash and the music stops, and Clint and Meredith start looking around for Brian, but they can't seem to find him anywhere. They start calling him, but he's not picking up. They check the bathroom, but he's not there either. So they leave the bar and wait outside for Brian, but as the final party goers leave the building, Brian is still nowhere to be found. they assume at this point, maybe with alcohol clouding their judgment a bit, that Brian must have just went home without them, and so they just leave, go home for the night.
Yeah, that's scary. I mean, like, you know, the thought of, again, like going out to bars with your friends and like you just can't find one of them at the end of the night. It would be hard to make that decision to just like, well, I guess we can't find them.
Yeah, and like also too, like I know they're like older, so like, you know, sure, like he can make his own decisions, but like I'm not that much younger than Brian, and like I can imagine like going out with my friends and just like not being able to find him and just be like, like, oh well, I guess again if they're drunk, like sure.
Well, and after a certain point, like there's only so much worrying you can do before it's just fair. Like you can't make a body appear or a human.
Sure, yeah. I guess it's like in my mind, I'm like, okay, like, you know, there are, I'm sure, police officers like climbing around everywhere. Like, you didn't think to like stop one of them, but like, again, like, I guess you just like can't even get into their brain at this point. And like, I can also see a world where like, okay, it's like, you know, he's dealing with something, you know, clearly he would just like wanted to do this on his own. Like, let's just like let him do it, you know, give him the space.
Also, really quick, on the wine, I'm starting to taste more of the fruits. Are you getting that a little bit? Or
definitely, I'm getting like a lot of the cherry too. Like actually, now that I think about it, like the cherry is like very like mouth forward for sure.
Yeah, and I like it. I'm happy that that's coming through. It gives it a sweetness, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, now, only we know that is, like, not what happened here at all. Like, Brian did not just leave on his own. We know that Brian is never heard from again after that night and is never seen again after the camera picked him up talking to those two young women outside the bar shortly before closing. What we don't know is where Brian went after that. And if he wasn't in the bar after closing, like, how did he end up leaving?
Yeah, that's weird because, like you said, like, there's security cameras everywhere. So in theory, if no one saw him leaving, it would have been on the cameras, you would think.
Right, you would think so, right. But again, like this bar and this bar mall of sorts is covered in security camera video, and police who have combed through every single second of these security videos are racking their brains trying to figure out how he left, because that escalator, like the one that we were just looking at, was the only entrance or exit customers could use to get to and from the bar. And after hours of looking through and analyzing the content of this video, they say with 100% certainty that there is no way that he left this way.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, like I think of the missing person cases that I've covered, and that's always such a crucial point in the investigation is when was the last time this person was seen?
Oh yeah. Who was the last person to see them? Right.
And what was the point at which it was realized that they like were not accounted for?
Right.
You know? And this is basically that point of like, well, if he didn't leave or there's no known evidence of him leaving, how did he leave? Because he had to have left. You know, it's not like the bar staff just like had him in the back and wasn't telling anybody.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's where my mind goes, right? If it's like, if there's no evidence of him leaving the bar, like clearly the freaking bar staff, like, you know, like you said, like held him captive somewhere, but like that obviously didn't happen. Like, to be clear, like, you know, again, like not accusing the bar of anything like that. That did not happen. And so totally valid point there of like, okay, if you can't pinpoint the exact moment where they, you know, wandered off into the world and was never seen again, like that is such a huge problem for your investigation, because like, sure, like you have this video of them where like he was last seen, like, okay, sure. But like, then like his movements are so unclear. And like, if you can't find any trace of him beyond like where he was last seen, where like he obviously should have left, like that is a problem.
Well, it's not like people just vanish into thin air.
Right, exactly.
People don't just go poof, they're gone.
Yeah,
like
right. And like that's, and if from an investigative standpoint, like, you know, like you can't do anything with that, right? But like as far as we're concerned, like from the evidence that we have right now, like that's what it seems to be. You know what I mean? But like that obviously didn't happen.
I've always wondered too how tough it is for like police and investigators to like wrap their brains around being able to basically tell the family or release the information after like they've had time to look into it, like having to approach people and be like, so we looked at everything and we have no idea where he went.
Right. Yeah, right.
That's wild. Like, how does someone just, like, go unaccounted for?
And two, I have to say as well, because like from a police perspective, like to give them a whole bunch of credit here, like they're dealing with a bunch of people who like, are like heavily intoxicated, out of their minds, up until 2:30 in the morning, right? Like,
sure.
Like probably drinking all night. And so like very, 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 very unreliable witnesses here. And so I can't imagine like, that they're getting much of anywhere, right? Like maybe bar staff or help, but like I'm like, again, like packed bar, like they're not keeping track of every single person that's in there.
Yeah, and it's always crazy to see how much, like, when a person isn't found, how much, like, the municipality comes out of whatever town or city that is, and they're like, this person is missing, Did that happen where Brian was at all?
Yes, a good bit. And like, even like fast forwarding like way ahead, like the FBI is even involved, because of like the like wide scale, like, search for this guy. That's how like far this investigation had gone. And so it certainly didn't, stay in the city of Columbus by any means.
Yeah. And it's, when you everyone knows, like, the further you get away in time from the point at which the person went missing, the less likely it is they're going to be found alive.
And it's crazy too, because I the unspoken fake rule of like you have to wait 24 hours to report someone missing. It's that's not a rule, by the way. Like that doesn't exist. But like also too like what I was reading like very, very recently about how the reason that myth kind of came about was because was actually an FBI policy of like you can't get the FBI involved until the person's been missing for 24 hours.
I see.
Because then it's much more likely that they went out of state. And so like certainly in this type of scenario.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it could only take a couple of hours to get out of state limits.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So, and on top of that, too, Melissa, the city of Columbus is a highly surveilled city. The city has more security cameras than the cities of Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Toledo combined. Police even searched through security video of surrounding bars and restaurants, and there's no sign of Brian there either. Police do end up floating a couple of possibilities about how Brian could have evaded the cameras. The first is the idea that Brian may have changed clothes inside of the bar and put on a hat to keep his head down to leave discreetly, but even in this theory, police said it's unlikely because, like I said, they analyzed every single second of these videos, and every single person at the Ugly Tuna Saloon that night was accounted for entering and exiting the bar, except for Brian.
So the first thing that comes to my mind here is I've sat in on enough trials and enough court cases to know that surveillance camera is not as reliable as we would probably hope it to be. It's, as we've all seen, when you see it on the news, that's the quality of video we're working with. It's pixelated. It is
it's
laggy.
Not much better than that. Right.
Yeah, it's not like the news like makes it look like that. Like that is what police are working with in terms of looking for people. So it's pixelated. The colors are not very accurate. It lags.
And certainly in 2006, like even more true than that, right?
Probably, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's almost 20 years ago at this point. Right. So, I thought of too, like, how when the, bars close, everyone leaves in a pack, like the whole bar, like everyone leaves at once. So it's possible that he could have been smushed into a crowd and not really noticeable.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, they're like the investigators like speak positively enough about like what I was just saying about how they were like, nope, there's no way he left. We counted every single person. And so like, and even described to the point of like, they were like, okay, like this dude in like this shirt, like, in this hat, like in this color clothing. Okay, let's track him, make sure that he actually leaves. Okay, this dude leaves. And like literally is like tracking like every single person. And like they spent hours like combing through all of this to be able to say that. And like, again, like they like speak so publicly and positively that like they accounted for, like they looked at every single person, every single face that walked into the bar that night and said for sure that every single one of those people left the bar that night except for Brian. And so like if they're like they made a point to mention that, and so I guess I put enough credence into that to be able to say that. But I do agree with you of like, okay, how can you say that for so sure? But if they can say it so positively, then I have to kind of be like, okay, maybe, they have a really good point, but still, I mean,
Yeah, I've never sat down and tried to count hundreds of people walking in and out of a bar on surveillance video.
Yeah.
But just from what I've seen of surveillance video, I'm sure that you can get pretty close to 100% certainty. Yeah. But I mean, who knows? Again, I'm not a police officer, and I am not discrediting their work by any means.
Right.
Again, like I said, the quality of technology they're working with is not their fault, and it's challenging. Yeah. I'm hesitant to say 100% certainty is reliable.
And I also say, too, because like I know enough cops and like lawyers and all that stuff to say that like they never say 100% certainty.
Sure.
And so like for that, like they always like leave a little bit of room for like,
of course.
Yeah, we're like pretty sure, but like not 100%. So like, but like they said, like they're confident. And so like I, put it, okay, like if you say so, like, I don't know, that, like just because I know that that's how they talk. So like, it's like, if you say that it's 100%, then okay, I believe you that it's 100%.
The only thing that helps them in this case is how tall he was.
Yeah, right.
Because tall people, as a fellow tall person, I am almost 6 foot tall. We do tend to stand out.
Yeah. Fair,
at a bar, we're easy to find.
Yeah, that's fair. And I also have to say too, because this theory kind of came out of left field, only because it's like it's going off of the assumption that like he may have like planned this like whole elaborate scheme, to like exit the bar like under like to like escape, right? Like because if he like brought a change of clothes with like I never saw like a change of clothes like in his hands like in any of those security videos, so like that's a little hard for me to believe, but like still the fact that they even went there like makes me think that like they're assuming at this point that he like left to like escape, to go missing, right? Instead of like to whatever happened, like a bad thing happened to him, like he did this by himself.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't think that. I mean, I get them putting it out there as a possibility because they need to evaluate all options.
Sure.
But I don't think that that's what would have happened.
Yeah, and it's a little, definitely unlikely, and we're going to get there a little bit later on, and so we'll definitely revisit that. But the second theory, is a bit more of a likely one according to them, but one police that say that they're still really unsure about. They said that Brian simply could have left as normal that night, but maybe the cameras just simply missed him. The cameras that we're talking about here, I guess, either automatically pan the area that they're set on, or they're controlled manually. So I guess this theory that they're talking about says that the moment that Brian happened to leave the bar, the cameras just happened to be like not in the position to capture him, which to me says one of two things, or maybe possibly even both. Either this was like the biggest freaking coincidence on the planet, like the absolute like perfect set of circumstances, that all of these cameras were in the perfect position at the perfect time to miss the exit of the only person who went missing from that bar that night, or that Brian was able to like intentionally avoid all of these cameras by slipping out when he was just out of view, like super spy style. But even in either of those just seems to be incredibly unlikely, because I read at some point that the cameras were like hidden into the ceilings, like kind of like those dome cameras, and like how would Brian know how to avoid all of them like so conveniently and so skillfully? Like that just doesn't sit well with me.
Well, and especially when intoxicated.
Yeah, right.
It's not like you're going to be like pinpointing, okay, and go.
Right.
You know?
And like it seems like just like such a like an elaborate scheme, again, for someone who like has been drinking all night, and for like there's really no reason that anyone has like assumed that he like wanted to go missing and like escape into the night.
Well, I don't know how much the cameras pan, and if they totally like shave off like part of the shot to the point that it could have, I don't know.
And I didn't see like, and I've watched that security camera video like over and over and over again. Like they never move. I don't know. I guess like it's always like that same exact frame. So I don't know. That just seems really far-fetched, and I don't really like, this kind of seemed to come out of left field for me of like, oh, they move? Like, okay, like I don't know, it just felt odd. And like I'm sure they do, like I'm sure they move, like they have to, but like it just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like, again, it just came out of left field of like why, like I never saw any like evidence that they moved. Like it just seems very bizarre to me, but that's what we're talking about. So,
well, yeah. And like you said, I mean, what are the odds that the one guy that goes missing was out of the shot
simply because of like a camera issue? Yeah, totally. Just doesn't feel right to me at all. But there is one more theory about what may have happened that night. And unfortunately, it's probably the most likely option. All right, Melissa. So we have like so much to talk about wine-wise. So how is this going down for you?
Well, so I was just noticing that the fruit flavors are coming through a little bit more. I know you said you're getting the black cherry a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so, what I'm really appreciating about this wine too is like the bold, because like I love like bold reds and I like subtle whites. And so this is definitely giving bold red and like, but like heavy on the fruit flavors too, which like should have been expected.
Yeah. No, I'm liking it a lot. It's not as I don't know what would you say on a scale of 1 to 10, how dry would you say it is?
Oh, it's definitely on the fruitier end of the scale.
Right.
It's like
that's what I was going to say.
It's like a drier fruity for sure. Like it's definitely not like as dry as like a Cab or like a Malbec or whatever. But it's definitely so. But like I think I don't know. Because I think like the heavy fruit flavors is kind of throwing me off a little bit. Yeah, I would probably say on the scale of 1 to 10, probably like a 4 on the dry scale.
Yeah, I was gonna say like 5 or 6. For me, but that's it's not as dry now as it was when we started because the fruit is coming through more. So I'm like, okay, it's not just tannins and oak.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So because I like, I very much so, when I drink red wine, I like to just like relax and just like sit back and do whatever, like for the night, like usually put on a movie, whatever. This I have like a really strong suspicion that like, once I start drinking this, like it's going to be like, a lot more of like my energy start going to flow a lot more because I'm starting to feel that. Usually when I drink reds, I am like, okay, ready to go to bed, like good night.
Right.
Bye.
Definitely.
I'm not getting this.
This is a perfect summer wine for red because summer we think of whites, we think of light, and but this it's an art to find a good red wine for summer. I feel so. This is a good summer red, I think.
Yeah, and it's not too heavy too, which I feel like is the problem with reds in the summer is that they're too heavy and then it just like ruins it and it just like sours too quickly. I could totally see myself like on the porch with a glass of this for sure. So yeah, you're definitely on track for that.
It's making me want a charcuterie board really bad. I would love to have like some really good seasoned crackers, and then some prosciutto, and then some fresh fruit to put on there. Perfect for this.
Oh my God, Melissa, you're speaking my language. I think we should pause and like, go grab that really fast and then return.
Well,
what do you think?
I'm going to need to go to the grocery store. I don't have those things. But no, it's delicious.
Oh man, I do like nothing I love more than a good charcuterie board. Ooh, love that. Well, I do think we should get back to Brian's story because like so much to talk about. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to know all these theories about what might have happened because, a missing person, it's like, where'd they go?
The possibilities are endless. And certainly in this story, possibilities are like even more than that. So the final theory that I do have to talk about how Brian could have exited the Ugly Tuna Saloona unseen that night is that he possibly could have exited through a service entrance that police were able to determine had no cameras pointed at it at all. Now, this feels like the most logical explanation, but it's still a little out there, and let me tell you why that is, Melissa. because this entrance wasn't even really like for employees of this plaza at all. It was more so like an emergency exit of sorts, but basically it's this labyrinth of hallways and staircases and an elevator even that would have led Brian to the first floor and then through this service exit that at the time led right out to a construction site. And police said this path and the construction site would have been really difficult to navigate sober, but not entirely impossible, but still like you would have had to know where you're going. But ultimately they said it was highly improbable that he used this exit on his own, because how would he have known like how to access it or like even to use it, how to use it at all?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like too, he would have had to known where it was.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I've never been in this bar, but usually those kinds of exits are not in plain sight, you know?
Yeah, and like service exit like is probably the best way to describe it, like simply because it's kind of, it's like from, again, what I'm seeing, it's kind of like a temporary exit kind of thing. Like it's not like this was at one point like an employee exit or like, you know, at one point like some sort of exit. Like this was like they were building onto it, and like this was how like people who needed to get to that construction site like were able to get there.
So one question I had was, since you had to go up an escalator to get to said bar, is this, I mean, it's on a second story, obviously, I would think. So a service exit, like, how does that work on a second level? Do you have to go downstairs at some point?
So, yeah. So like I said, so you have to kind of like go down these hallways, and then you had to get onto an elevator. Get down.
Okay, I missed that part.
So, well, no, but like really important to note that. So thanks so much for saying that, because again, like how would he have known to get down this hallway and like, again, still be like not picked up by security cameras at all, because like you like it's still like there's like these security cameras that go onto the exit or the entrance of this bar, so like he would have had to go all the way down these hallways, known to get onto the elevator, go down. I would imagine you have to go down even more hallways to get out this exit door, to go through this construction site, to get onto the street, instead of just going down the frickin' escalator.
Yeah.
Especially if he was drunk.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. It sounds like, well, and it's so scary what can happen like when you're drunk too. I mean,
yeah. Well, and like too, like I think about so many like different cases that I've read about where like, you know, where it's like you're drinking, like whatever, like maybe like someone slipped something into you. Like point being is that like your mind is altered. And like you just like start chatting with people. Like I know, like I'm like a very like you know me, Melissa. Like I'm a very strong extrovert, and so like you know me out and about, like you know put a couple drinks in me. Like I'll make friends with anybody.
Yeah, I'm far too trusting of strangers.
Yeah,
in those situations.
Exactly. And so like you go like you know if you like meet somebody and like they're just like, hey, you know like let me, like I have this really cool car, you know, and it's like, oh, we've been chatting for like, you know, what felt like 3 hours, but like in reality it's been 3 minutes. They're like, yeah, let me go like, you know, check out this dude's car, and he says he like the only way to get there is like down this elevator and whatever. Like, you know, but I'm like, it sounds ridiculous, but like, you know, in reality, like in those
it could totally happen.
It could totally happen, and that's where my mind goes at this point. Like what else makes sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I mean, it's interesting to think about too, Brian being like this big, tough guy. Yeah. I mean, I'm a woman, so I wonder if it's like a different experience for a more feminine person versus someone like Brian sounds more masculine. And I feel like when I see drunk guys in their 20s, they're more like quick to cut things off.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, because like frankly, like you know, you're less like people like us, right? Like you know, we've probably been in like a situation or two and like have our guards up to a certain extent, because like, you know, I know like you're like way tougher than I am, Melissa, but like I know that like if somebody tries to do something to me, like I don't stand a chance, but like someone like him, I'm sure like frankly, first of all, has never been in that situation, and second of all, like, you know, even if they were, like they could probably defend themselves, but like not if they're drunk, not if they've been drugged, like, you know, all these like things.
True.
So yeah, I'm sure they do feel a little bit more confident, you know, to a certain extent.
And even, we have to address this, even if someone were to have killed Brian, let's say someone did, he is not a light person to carry.
Right. Yeah. So true.
He's a big dude. Like,
yeah. Right. So exactly. And so that's why, you know, again, like, you know, like I think it's very obvious that like whatever happened to him happened outside of the bar.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Like happened in some place that like nobody was able to see.
Yeah.
For exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it would have been noticed by somebody inside the bar.
Yeah, for sure. So Brian's odd mystery left police with really not a whole lot of places to focus their investigation. Sure, Brian was last seen at the bar, but there was no sign of him there. On top of that, Brian's cell phone, credit card, and bank records all hadn't been touched since the night he was missing. So they check hospitals and homeless shelters and look through dumpsters in the city dump. The city even gave police permission to search through the sewer lines, but there was no sign of Brian anywhere. By May, it didn't really seem like they were any closer to finding Brian than the night that he had went missing. In the meantime, Brian's father and brother were distraught and confused. There was a small glimmer of hope, though, of a clue in May when Brian's apartment was broken into.
I just feel like this is, I don't know. What are the odds that, like, okay, person goes missing and then their apartment gets broken into?
Right.
Like, no. Like,
yeah, right. Like, obviously has to be like that to me is like, oh my God, like, hello, like whatever was going on. And like, too, I think like, just like to pause there too, because I think, you know, like as much as you know somebody, first of all, you never really know somebody 100%. Right. But like, you know, as much as you think, you know, somebody, whatever, like you don't know like what is going on, like in their apartment, in their space. Right. And so like, I just think that's like so intimate. Right. And so like you don't know like what's going on in their drawers. You don't know what's going on, you know, in that closet, in that weird, you know, like thing like on top of the closet that you just like assume was whatever. And so like point being is that like, you know, when this kind of thing happens, like my mind goes to like what was he like, you know, doing behind closed doors? Because like you said, like what the heck are the odds that someone goes missing and also has their apartment broken into, let alone like what are the odds that like either of those two things happen, like let alone both.
So where my mind goes to at this part is if Brian, and I don't know, you know more about the case, like was Brian well off financially? Because if someone wanted to gain something, you kill said person and then you rob them and then you have no one to report said robbing.
Right. And, you know, I also just have to like point this out too, only and like this is like is going to sound accusatory, but it's really not like I just feel like it's just like a very like good generalization. Like everyone who I've ever met who's been in nursing, who's been in, you know, medical fields, like those are like exclusively like the people who I know who like are into drugs, like for whatever reason, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they are the ones like those people always vape, like they always like, you know, are smoking weed, like they're always doing like the hardest drugs ever imagined, which is just like the complete opposite of what you would imagine.
Absolutely.
I never read that like Brian was into all that too, but like, you know, that's where my mind goes. Like, you know, maybe he did kind of get involved with the wrong person on that front and like, you know, like they made him disappear and like they broke into his apartment because he took something that he wasn't supposed to, like even if it was just an accident, you know?
I would not doubt it, especially being in medical school and being at the end of a semester. So long story short, my boyfriend right now, he went through medical school. He's not in the medical profession anymore. He decided to change gears and didn't end up becoming a doctor and he found a different path. But he did talk about how stressful medical school can be. And just the amount of pressure with like the tests and all the information that you have to know and the competitive nature of getting into the residency program you want or passing certain exams. And a lot of the stories I've heard is that, drugs are definitely the norm among medical school, not just medical workers, like you were saying, doctors and nurses, but specifically the students, because of all the pressure to just pass their exams and pass their classes. It's like Adderall, weed, like whatever you got to do to get through your exams, like they will do it.
Yeah. And like, again, I never saw a thing, like a word written about like Brian being involved in that world at all. But like point being is that like this is the reputation, you know what I mean? So it's like it wouldn't surprise me if like that was the motivation here somehow.
Yeah, so. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't rule it out. Just because when it comes to like illegal drugs, when there's like dealing on the side and stuff like that, it's scary how quickly people can turn, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
From what I've heard.
Yeah. Well, so like, it's not even like totally clear that like that this person took anything from Brian's apartment, but somehow police were able to determine that this was totally unrelated to Brian's disappearance, which feels odd to me only because like, again, like what are the odds that you go missing and you're the victim of a random break-in? Like, frankly, like what are the odds that like either of those two things happen to you, let alone like both of them? But I have to buy it, because like what other choice do I have other than to believe what like police are telling us at this point? But it just feels like Brian's having some like really bad luck crime-wise anyways.
Yeah, definitely. That seems odd. Maybe whoever broke in, like they had a certain motivation. They were looking for one item or one thing, and that thing wasn't there.
And again, I go back to like the fact that like you like really don't know anybody, and like you really don't know like what goes on in like the privacy of their own home. And so like but like, and to your point, like maybe like they were looking for that one thing that like nobody knew that he had. Brian's soon-to-be fiance Alex had told Dateline that she was visiting Brian's apartment every single night, hoping that he somehow made his way home. She said she would get there, see no one was home again, and just lay on his bed and cry. And again, this like, took place for months. And she was also calling him every chance that she got, but each and every time the calls went straight to voicemail until one night in September, about 5 months after Brian went missing, when suddenly the phone started to ring. And Alex stood there on the other line, her heart beating out of her chest. She was holding her breath, but then it went to voicemail. Still, though, that is like a huge, thing that this means that his phone is on, right? So Alex runs to Brian's father and to police, who go to Brian's cell phone company, which replies saying that this was more than likely a computer error and that Brian's phone is still off and disconnected and the call going through was just a fluke.
That would drive me so crazy.
Oh, yeah.
If I was Alex, I would be like, oh my God, oh, it's connecting. And then there's nothing to derive out of it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, imagine the hope that she just had for like something. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and two, I mean, so initially, like hearing that, it's like, well, something had to have happened. Like Brian's phone needed to have been on.
Yeah. And again, like this is talking about like 2006 kind of cell phone technology. And so like it's, it's not working necessarily off of like Wi-Fi and stuff. It's simply just working off the cell towers. And so like the signal like is pretty much, it's relying pretty much exclusively on that signal.
So back then, I mean, were they able to like still ping it though, right?
They were actually able to ping the phone. Brian's phone pinged in Hilliard, Ohio, which is about 14 miles northwest of Columbus. Now, I have to imagine they followed up on this anyways, but I haven't seen a thing more than that. So I'm going to safely assume that this was probably yet another dead end, but like, I don't know, like my brain goes in all sorts of different directions when I hear that.
So nothing was found in Hilliard, Ohio. I will say, so the way that cell towers work, I am not an expert on cell phone signals, but like your phone can ping to a tower that's a few miles away from you.
Oh, yeah.
So just because his phone pinged in Hilliard, Ohio, doesn't mean he was in Hilliard, Ohio.
Yeah, and like again, like a lot like fewer cell phone towers back then than there are now, but like because to your point, like it's the closest cell phone tower that covers that area. And so
sure.
There may have been a closer cell phone tower that just was like pointed in the other direction, because that's just how those things work. And so like that must have just been covering and again, it could have been like covering the whole 14-mile, radius of, going down to Columbus. But I mean, that's where the cell phone tower was. So Brian's family worked tirelessly to make sure that no one forgot about Brian's disappearance. They covered the city in missing persons flyers, and Brian's dad talked openly and honestly closely with reporters, anything to make sure as many people as possible had seen Brian's face and knew that people who loved and cared about him were looking for him. His story had really taken off at this point, garnering national headlines of the well-off med student who vanished into thin air inside a college bar in Columbus, Ohio. And when these types of bizarre mysteries happen, people come out of the woodwork trying to help. And one day, Brian's dad gets a call from a psychic saying that she knows exactly where Brian is, and that would open up a totally different door for everyone involved. The psychic has an oddly specific tip. The psychic tells Brian's dad that she knows that Brian is dead and that his body is being held underwater by the suction effect that takes place at the post of a bridge. Now, at the time of Brian's disappearance, he lived just a few blocks over from the Olatangi River, and the Ugly Tuna Saloona wasn't far from that either. So Brian's dad and his brother Derek bought fishing waders to search the bases of bridges that crossed the river. Brian's dad apparently even almost drowned himself trying to see if his son's body had been held underwater all this time, but they found absolutely nothing.
Well, first of all, kudos to them for not asking law enforcement to go out and do it and just doing it themselves. That's insane. True. I mean, not to say that, because I thought if I would have been in this situation, I would have told the police and I would have been like, hey, I don't know if y'all have a dive team or if you can call a dive team, but I don't know how to navigate water. So can you please find some law enforcement that knows how to go diving, basically.
Yeah. And also too, because I would say, police would probably hear a tip from a psychic, and if they call this in and be like there's no way I'm going dispatching entire dive team to go search this water off of a psychic. But a surprising number of these cases relies on that type of stuff. And so you'd be shocked. Frankly, I just did a couple weeks ago, I did the Joseph Sorelli case, and they did this whole thing based on what a psychic told them. And so I guess psychics are more relied upon source of information than you would think. But
yeah, I had that same thought too. If you were to call up the police and say, hey, I have this tip from a psychic, they would probably say
laugh you off.
Yeah, no thanks. But at the same time, I mean,
what do you have to lose?
If you have no other leads and you have nothing else to pursue in terms of looking for this person, I don't know.
Why not?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I try to put myself into their shoes because listen, I am a huge believer in psychics, but I also have read way too much about these psychics who just scam people to ever put any sort of stake into their especially when that just calls you out of the blue, right? And I'm sure his number was on every single one of those missing persons flyers. There's I'm way too much of a skeptic to even be able to do that, but at the same time I'm I definitely believe in psychics, so maybe we should do that. So I don't know. My brain goes back and forth.
So I'm a psychic non-believer. I don't want to say that it can't be true. I want to believe that they can have some way to, see into the future and be able to see these things. But I can't bring myself to buy it. And I don't know if that's just because I'm too much of a realist or whatever the reason may be. Maybe I'm a skeptic just in general and I always have a negative outlook on things. I don't know.
But, this bizarre tip takes us to a really interesting theory, Melissa, and a theory that I have so much to talk about. I just have to tell you about this theory. So it introduces us to a mysterious yet unknown serial killer that could have had something to do with Brian's death.
So first of all, I love serial killers. Not really, but love the storyline. This theory about Brian, though, what is the theory behind who this serial killer may have been.
Well, the serial killer, or at least that's what the proponents of this theory call them, has never been pinpointed as one specific person, but they are called the smiley face killer. And here's the story behind them. The smiley face killer theory was introduced by two retired New York City Police Department detectives. They spent 10 years investigating scenes of apparent drownings across the Midwest. At the time, they were looking at about 45 cases, but today more than 100 are on their list, and they believe there could be as many as 250 more from the late 1990s to 2010s. This so-called killer is said to have preyed upon drunk college men across the Midwest, killed them, and tossed their bodies into local rivers to make it look as though they had gotten too drunk, fell into the river, and drowned. The men were often leaving parties or bars where they had been drinking heavily and were more than often than not described as popular, athletic, and successful students, most of whom were white. Most of the men had GHB in their system, a colorless, odorless liquid depressant. The drug accounted for more than 200 deaths from 1996 to 2005. The detectives proposed that the men were not victims of drownings at all, but instead were drugged, possibly raped, and dumped into the river, which would wash away most DNA and other evidence that could tie the crime back to the perpetrator. The reason this killer is called the smiley face killer is because in all of the cases that the detectives identified as part of their investigation, there was a smiley face spray painted near where police believe the men entered the river, based on calculations which took currents, weights, and other factors into consideration.
That's absolutely insane.
Insane theory.
Also believable.
Yeah, in my head, I'm like, okay, like if there was one person going around killing more than 200 people, like we probably would have caught them by now. At least I would hope.
But what are the odds that 250 people? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think 45. I feel like feels like a good number. Like I feel like if that's what the case is, like if they're saying like 40-ish people drowned, and like this guy or this person or these people had something to do with their death. Like sure, I feel like that is like a solid number of people that like we're just because presumably like half of them, were just immediately discounted as, accidents, maybe the other half, were, looked at as accidents, but like, or looked at as, possible homicides, but like eventually, determined to be accidents.
I mean, for me, it's just weird that, most of the men were the same type. So they were popular, athletic, successful students.
Which screams serial killer to me.
Which were white, yeah, because we know serial killers prefer a type of victim. Right. And then that most of those men of that specific aesthetic had GHB in their system. Like what are the odds that those two things line up?
Like my brain also goes to like what type of person do you think of like getting like way too drunk and like going to go adventure down to the river and like falling in and dying like by accident, you know what I mean? Like this feels like stereotyping, but like odds are it's probably like college age, white kid, well off, super popular, like super outgoing. So,
I feel like that could happen to anybody. But yeah, you're probably right.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like odds are it's probably like that kind of kid. You know what I mean? Where this kind of thing happens. So like, I feel like it probably is like, again, like I can't say this with any sort of certainty, but like I do feel like it probably is like much more likely that that type of person like would die by accident like in this way. But then also too, like my other thought goes to, so like we're talking about drownings in like major bodies of water, and like there was like a smiley face like graffitied nearby, like where this person like may or may not have went into the river, or this body of water. Like my brain also goes to typically, again, and this is like all of this is all super generalized, so like take it as you want to, but like typically, if you like nearby, like in these types of places, like there are a lot of graffiti, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like what are the odds that like in those types of places like a smiley face just happens to be graffitied?
Right. That's what I was going to say too. And I wonder if it was a specific style of smiley face. Because what was it, just like 2 dots for eyes and like a line for a smile, or did it have a circle around it to make a face? Like,
yeah. And I haven't seen pictures of these smiley faces, but I have like read that they are like different types of smiley faces, like in all different forms. Like some of them are similar, some of them aren't, but like also like how many different ways can you like
do a smiley face?
So, yeah, I don't know. Like, look, I don't know. As much as I want this like theory to be true so badly, because I think that is like so fascinating. Like, not that I want people to like die because of it, obviously, but like just again, like, you know, just looking back in all these cases, like I think like a smiley face killer would be so interesting to study. But I think there are a lot of holes to poke in.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, the FBI has pushed back against this whole theory, saying there is nothing that they have found in almost any of these cases that have pointed them in any direction besides accidental drownings. And if these detectives' theory was true, then Brian Shaffer would be the only victim of this supposed serial killer whose body has never been found.
I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, okay, I see the point there. Okay, well, now I don't believe the theory as much of the smiley face killer. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, you would, because again, going back to what you were saying before, like bodies float. And so at some point, like, again, like if we're to assume that he was put in the river somehow, like, you know, what, 17 years later, like we would have found him?
You would think, unless the psychic was right and that body really just was held up against a post.
Under there. Yeah. I can't even think about that. I don't even want to, like, these kinds of stories make me really never want to get in a body of water, like, ever again. So, the Shaffer family tragedy, unfortunately, did not end there, though. In 2008, more than 2 years after Brian's disappearance, his father died in this really freak accident. He was outside of his home during a windstorm when a branch broke off and landed right on top of him and killed him, leaving Brian's younger brother Derek as the only surviving member of the family. And if there were still any rumors that Brian may have been still out there living a new life, what happens next certainly did nothing to extinguish those thoughts. When Brian's father died, an online memorial page was created for memories and well wishes to be posted about him, and one post in particular stands out. It's a post from someone who says they're in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and it's signed "To Dad, Love Brian."
You know, I really wish I was a better person, but my first thought is just, it's some internet sleuth pulling someone's leg, you know?
Right. And like, but like too, like enough to like, you know, make the family be like hello, like this is,
of course.
You know, like, you know, to stand out. But, you know, police were able to determine that this post was actually all a hoax. Some sick jerk on the internet who was actually in Franklin County, Ohio, and not the U.S. Virgin Islands decided this was funny, and it was not actually written by the real Brian Shaffer.
Not surprising, which sucks, because like, why are people out on the internet doing that, like pulling at people's heartstrings? Like, homeboy is missing. Why would you do that? That's mean.
Right. Friends, family, and detectives who all watched as Brian's father painstakingly fought tooth and bone to find out where Brian went vowed to continue that fight and to find those answers for Brian and his family. But years later, that is basically where things stand with Brian Shaffer's investigation. There have been some occasional tests from people who thought that they saw Brian, but every single one turned out to be totally bogus. But all of the years later, this bizarre mystery has turned up several theories about what may have actually happened to Brian Shaffer. The most prolific theory about what happened to Brian Shaffer is still the smiley face killer theory, and we barely scratched the surface on that theory, so maybe we'll have to have Melissa back on to do an episode just on the smiley face killer. Let us know in the comments if that's what you want. Investigators on Brian's case have told reporters that they have 3 main theories about what may have happened to Brian, but didn't go into detail about what those theories are, citing the open and ongoing investigation. But here are two other theories that were born mostly on the internet about Brian. The first and the simplest is that Brian went off to start a new life. He was clearly distraught about his mother's passing, and supporters of this theory say it's the only logical explanation as to how he could have left the bar that night inconspicuously and never be seen ever again.
I feel like this is possible, but I also kind of doubt it. Just because the amount of calculation that I feel like would have to go into like starting a new life and not being tracked down. I mean, it was 2006, but we still had phones. I mean, they were still... Technology was...
Bank records.
Technology was advanced enough. I mean, like... law enforcement had, advanced enough tactics by that point that I feel like he would have been found. Unless he, literally went to, someplace that doesn't communicate with the U.S., Sweden.
Like Mexico. Yeah. Well, right. Yeah, no, that's a good point, but, still,
I doubt it. I doubt it.
Yeah, he would have been picked up at some point, so... But, personally, I am not one at all to buy into any theory that anyone just, runs off into the world to start a new life for themselves, especially not someone like Brian, who seemed like everything was going so well for him. But I will play devil's advocate here just a little bit, only because I think there's a decent narrative that could give this theory some life. Brian's mom had just died, and he was clearly taking it very badly, and I also think back to him potentially flirting with those college girls, too. I do think there's a chance that maybe his mother's death made him realize that the life he was living wasn't necessarily what he had imagined for himself. I read that he was a real tropical guy, longing to live at the beach, and so maybe this major life change of losing a parent shook him a little bit, and he started having some second thoughts about marrying Alex. But at the same time, if that was the case, they're not married. So if he was really thinking this way, it feels like he could just break up with her, right? And do whatever he wanted from there, zero hoops to jump through. But let's go down a different rabbit hole. Maybe it had nothing to do with Alex at all. Maybe it was something totally different. It did seem like he was spending this last night before he vanished, with everyone left in his life who he cared about, right? He had this really nice dinner with his father where he seemed a little off and tired. He went out partying with his best friend. He called his girlfriend, and he even tried to get his little brother to join him too. Maybe he was planning to leave and was trying to get one more moment in with everyone he loved before he did that.
I don't know. So the thing with that theory that I immediately go to is, wasn't he fairly close with his immediate circle in general? Because let's say, he probably saw his dad often and had dinner with his dad.
Yeah.
Maybe not a nice steak dinner, but still interacted with his father often. So, people could always point to, literally if I went missing today, knock on wood, people could be like, oh, well, she had a good chat with her boyfriend, and she had a good, day with her coworkers, and, people could always point to, oh, well, they were making the most of their last few moments with their people around them.
Sure.
Because we all interact with the people we're close with on a regular basis.
He knows that, his dad is, in mourning, a recent widow, and, he's still just gonna, peace out, and, leave him to, to relive this whole different trauma.
Well, and Brian's dad said that Brian seemed tired at the dinner.
Yeah, right.
So, if you're really gonna have a last hoorah, you're not gonna half-ass it. You're gonna show up, and you're not gonna seem tired. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, unless, it's just, weighing on you that heavily that you can't even act like yourself. But
maybe
still, I
don't buy it.
But I totally hear what you're saying, and I don't think that doesn't feel right to me. I am just I am not the type of person to believe that the average human being can just start a new life, and just without anyone finding you at all, without any sort of trace at all. And like, he was just like an average dude.
Those theories always come up when someone goes missing, and it's like, I feel like where that comes from is people want an explanation that this person could still be alive.
Right. Like a normal explanation.
That they could still be alive. And I'm like, that never ends up being the case.
And you know, I just also feel like the average, and especially with like police for whatever reason, like because they like want to like portray this, like, you know, this community is safe, like these things don't happen here, like these things happen in like cities like, you know, New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and all this stuff. Like, I feel like there is like this natural assumption of like bad things don't happen here and like bad things happen somewhere else. And so like there's like this natural you know, place to go to of, you know, they must have just been done with it and just like, you know, gone off on their own. Like, no. Like, there's no way that somebody did something bad to them, because they must have just done it on their own, because bad things don't happen here.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I think it's I think it's BS.
Yeah. Bad things happen everywhere, and frankly, where you think bad things don't happen, that's where the bad things are bound to happen.
True.
Well, so the second theory is really interesting, and it requires me to go back just a little bit, Melissa. Remember Brian's friend Clint, the one that Brian was partying with all night?
Yes, I do.
Well, the most prolific and accusatory theory online points the finger right at Clint. And here's why. In the weeks after Brian's disappearance, police naturally questioned the people closest to Brian, not only physically, but also emotionally, too. Maybe they ask his dad about what he was like. Maybe they ask his girlfriend about what he was going through. Maybe they ask his brother about if he had any known enemies. And maybe they ask Meredith about what Brian was like in his final hour. And they also ask Clint about that night as a whole, who does tell police this whole story about the bar hopping and the shots, and in fairness is pretty open to them. Police ask all of those people, except apparently his brother Derek for some reason, to take a lie detector test, and every single person agrees except for Clint.
So immediately that's very suspicious.
Oh yeah, big time.
100%. But also, okay, so Clint, we know, is out for a night. We all know shenanigans can happen when you're out for a night. Maybe Clint, we don't know a lot about Clint's life. Maybe he was like out when he had lied to his girlfriend about where he was going. Maybe his parents didn't know where he was, like who he was hanging out with. Like, there could be so many reasons why Clint didn't want to take a lie detector test beyond it having anything to do with Brian.
And that's also like frankly, like, again, because I know enough cops, like that is frankly like a little bit of like a test of like, okay, like we're going to ask, because like lie detectors are frankly, again, like everyone who listens to this podcast knows what my opinions on lie detector tests are. Like lie detector tests are totally fucking bullshit. And so.
Oh, you think so? Oh, why?
I have, like, you want to go, like, this is a totally different episode of the podcast, Melissa, but, like, first of all, like, they're not even admissible in court, and so, like, what's even the point, right? And so, like, also, like, they're super, like, they're unreliable to the point of, like, if you take the test and you're just, like, super nervous, like, you fail. And so, like, what's, like...
True.
Like, what's even, like, so, point being is that, like, I could see that, like, just asking, like, just to see, like, who's okay with taking it, who, you know, like, who, like, acts strangely when you do ask them about it, like, that can be, like, the whole point of a lie detector test is to, like, set police into a direction of this investigation to, like, to have, you know, to give them a little bit more of an idea of, like, where to go. And so, like, my point, the whole point of my, of saying all this is to say that, like, if police ask you to do this, like, my opinion is, like, don't freaking take it to begin with, but, like, also, like, you know, from a police perspective, like, I can see how this is suspicious of, like, every single other person except for the person who probably was the last person to see him alive, is exception to take it except for him. I could also see too, because if he was really drunk that night, like, maybe he is just kind of like protecting himself a little bit of like,
maybe.
Like, I don't know if I'm gonna pass because, like, I don't really know, like, if you ask me just about anything, like, I was so drunk that night that, like, I don't know if I'll pass. You know, I don't know what happened.
Maybe Clint did some dumb shit. I mean, people do dumb stuff when they're drunk, you know?
But you would think, though, that, like, if he was, like with Brian the entire night, the entire last night that he was like around this world, right? That like that's the kind of statement that you want. You know what I mean? And
True.
like, yes, granted, like he told, frankly, he told police like every single thing that like we told you about this night. Like that, like his narrative is exactly what we all just told you about. Like that is like he was very forthcoming about this whole type of situation, but like just didn't want to take a lie detector test. But at the same time though, like again, from an investigator perspective, like you like if he's like one of two people, right, that like, you know, was with him in his final moments, again, presumably alive, then you would think that you would want to know that like everything that he was saying was 100% true. And so with that being said, again, like I have to have enough like faith in the police that like it wasn't just like, hey, you want to take a lie detector test? No, I don't really think it's really taking a lie detector test. And like that was like the refusal, as opposed to like, you know, we really need you to take a lie detector test. And he's just like over and over and over again said, no.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about how likely the Clint theory is, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, look, like, again, like my thing goes to, like this screams to me like very sophisticated killer, very sophisticated perpetrator, and like Clint does not seem like that kind of guy for me.
I don't know.
Well, since then, people online and even Brian's father and brother both say that this move felt really odd, and they said that they believed Clint knew more than what he was letting on. Whether that was him having something to do with Brian's disappearance, or that he just knew what happened or may have happened, but isn't necessarily being entirely forthcoming with police. Online sleuths have taken this and ran with it, saying they think that Brian may have told Clint where he was going and let him in on his plans to start all over, and was sworn to secrecy.
That one's a little more far-fetched for me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, personally, I don't think that Clint had anything to do with this. I think that, like, the more likely answer is that he potentially, like, you know, like, Brian told him something, but even that, I think, is, like, a little out there. So, I just think that, like, at some point, like, the secret comes out, right? Like, I don't know.
I feel like, too, if you're, like, I mean, my vibe that I get from Brian and Clint is that they were truly, like, good friends. They weren't just, like, surface level friends. Like,
yeah.
I think that if I went missing and I told my best friend, like, hey, I'm leaving, don't tell anybody where I am, you're sworn to secrecy or whatever, I feel like after a certain point, when she saw all of the commotion and all of the investment that people were putting into my well-being, I feel like she would have told somebody.
Well, and even if it's just like to say like, no, like he's okay, like, you know, like he's not dead, like he's not in danger anywhere, like he, like, you know, I know where he is, I can't tell you where he is, but he's safe, you know, but like so that does not seem like that's what's going on here at all. Like, again, like I said, like Clint doesn't like necessarily strike me as like this like mastermind, and so it's like at some point, like this again, like the secret is let slip at some point if there's a secret to begin with. So
sure.
Well, all of these theories are maybe a little fun to talk about, but they're not pushing the needle any further on actually finding Brian. So if you know anything about Brian's disappearance, call the Columbus Police Department at 615-645-4545 or your local FBI office, and we are going to put all of those numbers and links in our show notes and on our website. But that is all that we have for you this week. So, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on and speculating with us and talking with us and drinking wine with us. It's been such a pleasure.
It's been so much fun. I'm really happy that I got the chance to do this. It was really an interesting case.
Oh, it sure was. Yeah.
Missing persons cases are so fascinating. Just the number of questions that there are is so crazy.
Yeah. And I think with like both of our backgrounds too, I think we were like really able to like come through like literally every single piece of this.
Yeah. No, and I could not imagine, like, again, I've heard about enough of these cases. I could not imagine, like, you know, being tied to one of these people that goes missing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird to me how often it happens, which is probably like a whole nother episode. But like, I mean, the statistics we think of missing persons cases as like few and far in between, and it never happens. And it's like once in a lifetime that you hear about that. But it's actually like too often to sit comfortable with.
Yeah. Fair. But just in the meantime, just like tell everyone where they can find you and your work online.
Yeah, of course. So most of my stories daily are posted to my station's website, which is just kktv.com. But I do try to be on the Twitter. I'm not as habitual about it as I probably should be. It's Melissa Henry TV.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on. And thank you all so much for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories too. And if you are enjoying this podcast and are just wondering how you can tell anyone and everyone about it, the best way to help people find this podcast is by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you are listening right now. So be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we will see you next week for another episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.